you have a bit more hope in the book towards the end, right? About somewhat of like steps forward on this front. My husband was joking with me watching that amazing interview with Cory Booker on I've Had It, and how he'll tout 75% or something. He says of my donations are for $25 or less. It's like, okay, but what percentage of the money that you raise, right? Like there can be big checks that are cash, and then we're not even talking about the super PAC money.
Right.
And my husband was like, why did all of these corporate Democrats now like adopt the Bernie small dollar donation thing in this like cynical way? And it's always a little bit like off, because they can't say I'm only raising money from this, but they'll gesture towards it. That's the lesson that they took. It's just interesting to me to see Democrats at least like co-opt some of the rhetoric. I don't take corporate PAC money is the other thing they'll say. But okay, there's something you're also concealing. But there has been improvement in this area, right? Even like the embrace of candidates like Graham Plattner, and people wanting more of that. And you write about how Biden was embraced the Disclose Act. Can you speak a little bit about that and how that was a bit of an improvement for Democrats and a good thing in Biden's presidency, even if it didn't get passed?
So to my mind, the way out of this, first of all, let's be clear, there are no instant solutions. So let's just disabuse ourselves of the idea that this is going to change immediately overnight. But I do think there are three avenues that are quite hopeful. I mean, I'm not naive, right? But these are to my mind, having studied this, these are the three avenues where I think we can actually make some progress. So the Disclose Act is the legislation that would require basic disclosure of dark money spending a federal law requiring that. Sheldon Whitehouse has been a big champion of it. You mentioned President Biden came out and actually gave a speech saying it needs to be passed. So putting the the actual White House behind it as the leader of the party, that is a good thing. A version of it passed at the ballot in Arizona, not exactly a super blue state, a swing state, passed by 70%. Okay, so this is a wildly popular, sort of nonpartisan idea that we should at least know who is spending in our elections. And again, this is playing within the legal confines of Citizens United. So this is not like pie in the sky stuff where we know automatically the Supreme Court's going to say no. The Citizens United decision actually has this whole write-up about how disclosure laws should be robust and are fine. So that's one avenue. The next avenue I think that's really actually exciting is that this whole idea that corporations are people and thus entitled to free speech rights to spend in an unlimited way to buy elections, that whole idea is predicated on state incorporation laws. So, right, so like the court says, okay, states under their incorporation laws, they treat corporations as the same as people, and therefore we have to operate from that. In Montana, luminaries from both parties are pushing a ballot measure. It says, well, if that's the case, then can't we go back to doing what we used to do, which is changing our incorporation laws and saying that we grant corporations this, and this power, but we don't grant them this, and this power? We used to do that as a country all the time, that states granted corporate charters, and anybody who studies the law knows that corporations are artificial entities created by states. That is like technically what a corporation is. So human beings have rights. Corporations have powers. It's an important distinction. And so what they're proposing to do in this Montana ballot measure that should be on the ballot in 2026 is say corporations have all the same powers that they've had, except for one power. They can't spend in elections. Now, people may be hearing this and saying, well, okay, fine, like some company's going to go, reincorporate in Delaware and then come back into Montana. But here's the thing. Every state's corporate code says that out-of-state corporations have to play by the same rules as the corporations in states, inside the state. So the point is that Montana can't solve the problem for Colorado, can't solve the problem for New York or California. But Montana, if it passes that measure, can solve the problem or begin solving part of the problem inside of Montana.
Yes. Yeah.
And so here's the thing, they're going to the ballot for that in Montana because their Republican governor and legislature would never pass it. But blue states right now could pass the same thing. And I want to be clear. I don't think it's a cure-all. Like billionaires would still be able to individually spend money. This is about corporation spending, corporate spending. But billionaires would be forced to spend their money through official political committees, which require disclosure, right? Because this would apply to nonprofits as well. So I think there's something really important and innovative going on. Yes, would there be a Supreme Court challenge to this? Yes. But the Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that state incorporation laws are what determine what powers corporations have. For the Supreme Court, and I'm not putting it past them, but for the Supreme Court to try to thread a needle and undermine something like this, they would have to really dismantle parts of corporate law that I'm not quite sure the Supreme Court wants to dismantle. Right. So
right.
That's
and they've also made, the case law makes the distinction clearly that there is a difference between citizenship and so-called legal personhood. The legal personhood that is applied for corporation, applied with the motivated reasoning that you talk about. But it was applied, and they talk about it as a useful legal fiction, which creates oxygen or the ability for lawyers to make the case to the Supreme Court. That if it's basically a vehicle for these cases to be heard or whatever, then the legal fiction that their rights can be abridged in a way. Like there is a roadmap.
I go back to the distinction between rights and powers.
Yeah.
We as human beings under the Constitution have rights. Corporations are granted powers. They are artificial entities. And to get into the weeds about it for one sec here, it makes sense. A corporation gets things that we as human beings do not. Corporations get limited liability. If they go bankrupt, if they break the law, the people who are running them in many cases are shielded from themselves personally going bankrupt, at least under the law, right? The point is that states extend that special privilege, and they used to, in exchange for, we're going to grant you some powers, but not other powers. And again, this used to be relatively routine, 100 years ago, and states never gave up that power. So to me, that is really exciting. Now, the final thing that I think is really exciting, and although I think it's not well understood, take a look at the New York City mayor's race. Okay, Zohran Mamdani, he wins the primary. He's
matching funds.
The front runner. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He's the front runner. But what I worry about is that people, how did Zohran Mamdani do this? Well, he's a great candidate. He's got so much charisma. He's got such a powerful message, and his videos are so slick and well produced. All that's true. But I would say this: none of that matters, or very little of it matters, if he didn't have competitive resources to make sure enough voters saw those other positive factors. And that gets to New York City's public financing system. In New York City is one of, I think it's 26 cities and a couple of states, has a system of public financing where a candidate can run for office and have some of their small donations matched at a multiple level. For every dollar he gets $7 or $8 in small dollar donations, right? And what that means in practice is a candidate can run for office raising small dollar money and ultimately get enough through the matching system, enough resources to run a competitive campaign, not to outspend their opponent, but at least to be competitive. And it gives candidates like Mamdani a way to run for office without having to rely on private donations that come with the expectation of legislative favors. Now, you mentioned Graham Plattner and some of the other Senate candidates who were kind of nationalizing their races, becoming kind of national celebrities to tap into national grassroots donors. I think in this election and under this current system, that's the best you can hope for. But that is not an answer to the current system, because for every one candidate who can become a national celebrity because they happen to be running for an office that people perceive to be a national super important office. I mean, I would challenge the idea that U.S. Senate races are more important than governors' races are more important, but that's the perception.
Can I just interject really quickly,
Sure,
David, just to say that, like, it's because why you're drawing this distinction is very important. In New York City, the matching funds only apply to in-city donations. You had to verify your address, right?
Yes.
So that system doesn't exist in Maine. So a guy like Plattner has to get a national audience, where Zohran didn't have to because he just had to appeal to people within the city.
Exactly. So I'm not wrong. I'm obviously, like, I think the way Graham Plattner is doing it, and the way some of these other, Abdul in Michigan, et cetera, et cetera. They're doing it the right way under the current system because they don't have a matching fund, a public financing system available to them. But what I'm saying is that people shouldn't look at the way Graham Plattner or Abdul El Sayed are raising money as the solution, as the long-term solution to this problem. Because again, for every one of those candidates, there are 10, 20, 30, 50 candidates running down ballot that can never nationalize they can never become celebrities, right? And so what happens is that down the ballot, oligarch money has actually more power because it's harder to raise lots of grassroots money, enough to become competitive. So a public financing system that says if to any candidate of any party, any ideology, if you qualify, you get access to a competitive amount of resources. That is the way to really break the stranglehold here. And again, I go back to Citizens United. Like, Citizens United and the Supreme Court have said that public financing systems of elections are fine. They do not create, in the Supreme Court's view, constitutional problems. So those three areas are real, active, and live ways to start breaking this hammerlock of money in our politics. And for people listening, what I would encourage them to do, because I know corruption feels like this impossible problem. If you're sitting there in a blue state or a blue city, ask your local city council person, hey, do we have a public financing system of elections? What can we do to get the ball rolling on that? Hey, my state legislator, we're in a blue state with a Democratic governor. Can we just pass what Montana is doing? You will be surprised. The more local you go, you will be surprised at how much more agency you may have with a relatively few number of people. If you're trying to call your senator, if you're trying to call your governor, and you're 1 or 10, 2 or 5 or 10 people, maybe you're going to get ignored. If you're calling your city council person, if you're calling your state legislator, like, you're going to get more attention. And our screens are sort of designed to tell us not to focus on that. Right? We all have our screens. We want to focus on national politics, and it's exciting. And we forget the potential agency and power that we have right here in our local communities, where this battle really is unfolding as well.
Lastly, David, just because I wanted that we have some viewer questions. Alex B writes in saying, ask David about SCOTUS teeing up a case to completely destroy the Voting Rights Act and watch red states draw themselves 19 more House seats. Covered this last week and headlined it today, but arguments were heard yesterday and might be extending into today. This is a little bit kind of a partner piece to your research for this book.
I know all about it. Yep.
But it's very important, obviously.
Yeah, and I think we have to see it all as one large master plan. I want to go back to what we were discussing about the Powell memo, right? Democracy is becoming a problem. This is the thesis of the Powell memo. It's getting the government to do things that we, the elite, corporate power, oligarchs, don't want. And this is the central problem. Democracy is the problem. A government responding to the people is the central problem, essentially, that's the message of the Powell memo. And there, to my mind, there are really three pillars of this, and it explains the three pillars. We have to deregulate the campaign finance system and weaken anti-bribery laws so we can basically buy elections. We can rig that part of the democracy. We have to allow for our side, when it gets power, to rig the maps, to rig the playing field, to rig the terms of the game, to make small d democratic expression harder and representation harder to happen. That's the gerrymandering piece that we're seeing right now. And then, of course, there's the other piece, which is we have to make it harder for small d democratic institutions to hold corporations accountable in their direct relationship with corporations. I'm talking about unions, right? We have to go after unions. We have to allow for gerrymandering and the rigging of the rules. And we have to deregulate the campaign finance system to allow for buying of elections. It's the iron triangle of the assault on democracy. You know, I hear people say, you know, Donald Trump is the crisis of democracy. I see Donald Trump as the culmination, the expression of the crisis of democracy. But if you're worried about the democracy crisis, let me introduce you to the master plan that's never before seen the light of day until our book is coming out with all these documents published. This master plan that has allowed for the buying of elections up and down the ballot for the last 20, 30, 40 years. Like we are in the culmination of the master plan that created the democracy crisis. This is not something new. It is not something sudden. It is the climax of it.
Very well done, bringing master plan back in. It's seamlessly working that in. It's great.
I mean, it was like 2
work.
years of work on this book. I mean, really, like I said, I really mean, I'm about to turn 50. I've been working in politics and media for 30 years. This is truly the most important journalism project I've worked on because it really has surfaced information that I think people sort of theorized it was there, but we didn't really know it was there. To see them write it down, it's not just important for history. I want to leave people with this idea that if we can understand that what's going on is part of a deliberate master plan, executed by specific people with a specific goal, what it means is it's not a natural human evolution. It's not a force of nature.
Right.
It means that it can be reversed. It can be rolled back. It was created by humans. It can be reversed. This is not some, divine force here. This is like we have to have our own organizing, our own plans to reinvigorate the democracy. I mean, and imagine what they felt like. Back in it's 1971, Ralph Nader's winning all sorts of fights in Congress. They were a tiny minority that were throwing ideas against the wall. They probably seemed totally unrealistic, but they worked at it for decades and decades. I'm not taking inspiration from them, but it's only to say they could have been demoralized and checked out too, but right. they actually figured out a plan, they stuck to it, and they made it happen. And in some ways, that should be a reminder to all of us.
Absolutely. And if you're saying, this is you've done some great investigative work in the past, very, major name on it. So that's makes people should check out the book even more if that's what you're saying. Master Plan is what it's called, The Hidden Plot to Legalize Corruption in America. David Sirota, as always, check out The Lever as well. Thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
And thanks to you. And I want to add one last thing.
Yeah.
Part of what Powell writes about is the infiltration of media. And I will say that one of the things we've obviously seen that culminate, Barry Weiss, the Ellisons, the billionaire. One other thing that I am hopeful about is that the reinvigoration of real independent media is something that is extremely important right now. And you are one of the outlets that is part of that movement. And so for everybody listening here right now, I don't care whether you support The Lever, the Majority Report, any other independent media, just support independent media because it is all a part of unwinding this master plan.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate your time today. And we will put a link to a master plan down wherever people are listening to or watching this and at majority.fm. Good to talk to you, buddy.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right. Of course.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.